I welcome you all very warmly to our third Worlds of Consciousness, which this time will be online. My name is Marco Schmieke, and I'm so happy that you are all with us today in the morning. This call is in the morning from European time, so that you from Asia can also participate, or maybe some from Europe also. But later in the evening, around 6 o'clock, Central European time, we will have a second version of this Worlds of Consciousness program, which will cover other parts of the world like Europe and the United States. So you can expect a journey today, which will be around a little less than 2.5 hours, which will take you and us, or we go this journey together through different perspectives of consciousness. Probably we start talking about consciousness. Before talking about consciousness, we are thinking about consciousness. But then as we proceed, we're looking more and more about what consciousness is existentially. What does it mean that we are a conscious being, that I am consciousness? And we ask questions. Am I consciousness and have a body, or am I a body and have a consciousness? Still, it's intellectual questions, but looking at this amazing topic of consciousness from different perspectives will help us to understand and then also get a feeling for what it means to be a conscious being. And then coming more to the later stage of our journey together, we're more and more looking for experience of consciousness. We're looking for having an experience as a conscious being and experiencing consciousness itself. For this purpose, we have invited a very illustrious range of speakers. 3 of them you see already now with me, and others will come later joining us. And we anyway have a maximum of 6 speakers here in Webinar Jams. So I welcome very much Dr. Maika Steinborn to be with us. Consciousness is very much also a topic which has to be seen from the female perspective. You're a psychologist, and I think I'm looking very much forward to your contribution, as you will shed light on consciousness from the psychological perspective. And as I know you also from the practical perspective. But consciousness, we start normally in this Worlds of Consciousness, which we actually have already now the 3rd time. Fortunately, the first 2 times we had the Worlds of Consciousness was celebrated not online as we have it today, but we all came together in Bad Nauheim, close to Frankfurt, 2018, first time, when we had almost 700 people in a beautiful theater there in the Kur Hotel, and we had speakers from all over the world. Some of them are again here, and some of them not. So we had it twice already offline, or I would say in real world, and I'm sure that the next Worlds of Consciousness will also again be in the real world, so that we can all meet also on the physical level. So the second guest, which I like to introduce here, is David Lorimer. We also know each other since at least, I would say, almost 25 years, when I at that time joined the Scientific and Medical Network, which you are the program director since all that time. And since that time, you are, I think, did an extraordinary work on the integration of science and spirituality. And I especially like that it's a Scientific and Medical Network, because if you talk about consciousness, it concerns us as a whole human being. So it very much concerns also our health aspects in all regards. And so I think the Scientific Medical Network is representing this holistic view on health, for which you absolutely need an understanding what it means that we are a conscious being. And we have also the great honor to have Professor Harald Wallach with us. He is probably among the publishing scientists, one of my favorite. I saw you have more than almost 500 publications on a very high level, dealing with consciousness, dealing with even you developed an expansion of quantum theory, which also takes psychological aspects into account and the real world, a quantum theory for the real world. Probably today we won't have time to go deeper into this, and this is something which I also would like to announce now before, as I still have time to talk, we will have a seminar going on starting on the 9th of April. And maybe Ananda, you can show a little slide which has been prepared by the team of Dr. Chinmay Pandya. He's the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Dev Sanskriti University, who is also a co-organizer and co-host of this Worlds of Consciousness today. So I'm not greeting you all over the world now from Germany, but also in the name of the Dev Sanskriti University, which is a beautiful campus at the feet of the Himalaya mountains. If you stay there between Haridwar and Rishikesh, the campus already is very beautiful because it's very nicely arranged buildings in a beautiful arrangement of nature. But from there you can start, and within short time you drive into the Himalaya mountains and you can experience this intense experience of nature, but also of consciousness, because the Himalayas have always been a place where the yogis and eremites of the old times, and even now, were going to meditate and experience what it means to be a conscious being. So in the name of the Dev Sanskriti University, which is the host of this online seminar starting on the 9th of April, I invite those of you who have an academic background and or a therapeutic background. You can be also students from transdisciplinary background, like it doesn't matter if your expertise in physics or biology or quantum neurology or in philosophy or in psychology or in medicine or whatever is related to consciousness and might be affected by quantum theory. You are invited to this seminar, which I will be facilitating, but together there will be Professor Wallach will be there directly talking about his generalized quantum theory. Professor Raak, who will be later our guest here, he's a practical physicist. He's an experimental physicist at the CERN particle accelerator in Switzerland, but he is on the crest of what it means to be conscious since many decades. So this will be an amazing experience for you. And since yesterday on the website, I think, which was shown on the last slide, you can already register for the seminar. Maybe we can put the website in the chat, because then it is a link and people can directly click on it. Oh, the chat is off. So if you're lucky, you find it somewhere in the internet, or find it on Google. It's called, well, we will find a better option for you if you want to. Yeah, here it is. Oh, but that's a complicated one. So, but if you go on ecr-inst.com, this is the Existential Consciousness Research Institute, which we have started 3 years ago. And it's anyway a website worth visiting, because there you will find all our activities and also lots of videos of the past 2 Worlds of Consciousness conferences. But there you will find a link to the EQTC, Expansions of Quantum Theory Towards Consciousness seminar. All right. So let's start our journey of consciousness. And it's also a historical journey. It's a historical journey in the sense that I believe that the people much before the scientific period started, they had the idea that they are looking through the eyes of this body into the external reality. And they had this feeling that they are this something or this nothing which is within their body. And they had the perception of consciousness first, and then looking through the eyes, hearing through the ears, smelling through the nose, going through the senses, experiencing an external reality. I believe for those people, what they started to call soul was first, and then there was this reality out there. But then through this, through the development, especially in Europe, not only starting, but coming to a high point with the Greek antique philosophers, and later through the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment, people started to focus on that what the senses experience, and really started to very strongly focus on the external reality. And some of them recognized, oh, I don't find a soul out there, I don't find consciousness out there, therefore it might not even exist. So this is a historical moment, I believe. We are in time now that we are in a process of rediscovering consciousness. And one of the eminent scholars in this historical period was Galileo Galilei. And he is giving the name for an amazing initiative which David Lorimer started. And he's here today to talk about the Galileo Commission and the report of the Galileo Commission. So David, please tell us why this is so important now.
Thank you very much indeed, Marcus, and welcome everybody from all around the world. I'm speaking to you from southwest France, the area where the Cathars used to be in the 13th century, something I'm very interested in. Now, how do I share am I meant to share my screen? Ah, good, and then I can control this. Good. So my talk is entitled An Invitation to Look Through the Telescope. And you'll see why this is the case in a moment. And it's a real pleasure to be with you here, also with Professor Dr. Harold Wallach, who is the author of the Galileo Commission report, which is a project of the Scientific and Medical Network. This is a quote that many of you will know very well from an interview by Max Planck in 1931. I regard consciousness as fundamental. Matter is derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. There is no matter as such. It exists only by virtue of a force bringing the particle to vibration and holding it together in a minute solar system. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter. One could, in fact, spend a very considerable amount of time unpacking each of these propositions in this extraordinary statement. He was obviously Nobel Prize winner, the inventor of quantum theory, and so he had thought about these things, as had Schrödinger and Heisenberg and others, for very many years. And so this is not said lightly, that matter is derivative from consciousness, consciousness is fundamental. 1931, so we're now 90 years on from that, and we're really only just catching up with people like Max Planck in that respect. Now, here's Galileo looking through his telescope, perhaps at the moons of Jupiter. And this provides the context for what I'm talking about today. This letter here was written by Galileo to Kepler. And he says, here at Padua is the principal professor of philosophy, whom I've repeatedly and urgently requested to look at the moon and the planets through my glass, which he pertinaciously refuses to do. And why did he refuse to do this? Because he knew already that there wasn't anything to see. And the reason for this was the authority of Aristotle, as well as the church. And what he was doing was questioning the world view, questioning the prevalent model of reality. And this is the parallel that we're drawing. It's why the Galileo Commission is called the Galileo Commission, because of this analogy of the telescope, that we are inviting people to look through the telescope. Brian Ridley is a physicist who's written a new book called Reforming Science, which I reviewed recently in my publication. And he says that modern science has developed a public image of unchallengeable authority, a sense of establishment and infallibility. And this is exactly what needs to be questioned. Now, the overall aims of the Galileo Commission are to bring together advanced consciousness researchers, and this is a phrase from Dean Radin, advanced consciousness, which is the kind of thing that we're dealing with today, around a rigorous report written by Harold Wallach. And we have several versions of this report. We have the full report with lots of references, and that's 128 pages with huge bibliography. Then there is a summary of the report, also by Harold. And there's a summary of the argument in, I think, about 12 languages now, and all this is on GalileoCommission.org. And then recently we've got a layman's version, which was done by one of our colleagues, and it's that Hans has just managed to translate into German, so he may say more about that later on. And the aim is to expand the acceptable evidence base of a science of consciousness and to generate new theoretical models. And in the process, what we're trying to do is to widen the scientific and academic world views and build support for the proposition that consciousness can give us direct access to the deeper structures of reality. And this is a crucial phrase, a very good phrase from Harold, because I think if you look at all the transpersonal experiences, the psychic experiences, the spiritual experiences, you can conclude that these people are accessing exactly these deeper structures of reality, which are denied by the surface approach of current consciousness studies, looking mainly from the brain. And hence we can deepen our understanding of the nature of consciousness, as Marcus was saying earlier on, and reality. And I think this is exemplified in non-dual perception, which in the West is called gnosis, and experience, non-dual perception, and Gnostic, or no experience of gnosis, which is an experience of being what you actually are experiencing. It's direct, it's not indirect. And I haven't got time today to go into the kind of philosophical distinctions implied by reason and gnosis. And we at the moment this was for something that we did in December, Galileo Commission Summit and book launches. We've got another one coming up in mid-April for expanding consciousness, and then we got a May event for Gail Kimball's trilogy, and then in July we'll be collaborating with the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia to launch their very important new book called Consciousness Unbound. And in fact, last night I've just been reading the autobiography of Federico Fagin, who was the inventor of the Intel processor, and it's called Silicon. So he's part of this Consciousness Unbound, and it's an extraordinary book. Now I want to say a little bit about metaphysics in science, because science is in fact embedded in a metaphysic, and this metaphysic, broadly speaking, is scientific materialism or scientism, which is developed for historical and socio-political reasons. And I'll say a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the pioneers in the field who were addressing these kind of important issues in their time. First, Alfred Russel Wallace, who was the co-founder of natural selection with Darwin. And his very important essay is called No Antecedent Improbability of Miracles from 1870. And he does a very good critique of David Hume's essay on miracles and completely demolishes it. And I can strongly recommend that. You can just look that up on the internet. Then we have F.C.S. Schiller, who was a philosophy don at Oxford, and he produced the Riddles of the Sphinx. in 1891, which influenced William James for his Ingersoll lecture on immortality. And if you haven't read that, it's very short. It's only 7,000 words. It's an absolutely seminal text. And some of these people you'll see are fellows of the British Academy, which is the equivalent of the Royal Society in the UK. So FRS is Fellow of the Royal Society, and FBA, Fellow of the British Academy. So people like William James were also Fellows of the British Academy. And then you've got Edwin Burt, his Metaphysical Foundations of Modern Science from 1925. It's a book I bought in 1976, so a long time ago, and I have my copy behind me. Then you have Alfred North Whitehead, who was not only a Fellow of the Royal Society, but also a Fellow of the British Academy. Science and the Modern World, Process and Reality. Whitehead, I think, is making quite a comeback now because people are realizing that he was at least 100 years ahead of his time, and that his work on process and redefining some of the important philosophical terms was absolutely radical and seminal. Then you've got R.G. Collingwood, who was the Waynflete Professor of Metaphysical Philosophy at Oxford, and his essay on metaphysics from 1940, which was really a refutation of positivism and logical positivism in the Vienna Circle of the 1930s, and making it very clear that you cannot do science without philosophy. And I'll explain that in the next slide. And then finally, I wanted to mention Willis Harman from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, his new Metaphysical Foundations of Modern Science from 1997, which has not really been taken up. And I've been trying to persuade Noetic Sciences to get a reprint or at least a PDF of that incredibly important work back up on their website. So this is the underlying science of consciousness. Now here's Collingwood, and what he points out is that the answer to any question presupposes what the question presupposes. And all science begins with a question, and he points out the question is logically prior to its own answer. And therefore, all science begins with a presupposition. And this is a completely fundamental point, which everybody needs to understand, and which most scientists do not understand. Hence the inescapability of presuppositions, even if the majority of working scientists can remain completely unaware of this. So he points out that to attack metaphysics is to attack the foundations of science in terms of logic and reasoning that derive from philosophy. So you can't get away without having a philosophy. That's the basic point. And this was put rather amusingly by Richard Feynman. Philosophy of science is to scientists what ornithology is to birds. In other words, no interest at all. They just get on with doing science. But people like Sir Peter Medawar, for instance, were more philosophical scientists, are always aware that the science is a limited way of explaining reality. Now, in this light, you can see that the hard problem of consciousness contains exactly this presupposition. How does the brain generate consciousness? So the question contains itself the assumption that the brain actually does generate consciousness. And this was illustrated in an article from the New Scientist only about a month ago, when they were stating in the subtitle that we just don't yet know how the brain generates consciousness. Well, in my view, this is actually the wrong question. The right question is, what is the relationship between consciousness and the brain? And this was addressed and I think replied to by William James in his Ingersoll lecture on immortality, when he said that there were three different ways of looking at the issue. One was that this is from the bottom here, that it could be productive relationship that the brain produce consciousness, or it could be transmissive or permissive, allowing a certain type of consciousness, i.e. a filter view, which is developed very much in the work of the University of Virginia with their volumes Irreducible Mind and Beyond Physicalism. And so this assumption is almost universal within neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy, and it's unquestioned. And what we're trying to do with the Galileo report is to call that into question, and therefore to expand the basis on which a science of consciousness is actually pursued. So now we're going back to the telescope, and So what was true in William James's day and is still true now is that the assumption that the brain produces consciousness is consistent with conventional science and research. But it does mean that you refuse to look through the telescope at the evidence that indicates that consciousness might be fundamental and non-local, and as it were, beyond the brain. And we have a major conference every November, which I'm sure you'll be interested in, called exactly Beyond the Brain. And so this evidence, which many of you will be familiar with for ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, and so on, is routinely ignored and dismissed, ridiculed. And serious scientists like Rupert Sheldrake are attacked and vilified. And if you look at Wikipedia, these guerrilla pseudo-skeptics defending so-called science and reason control all the pages for complementary medicine and parapsychology, and all the biographical pages like Rupert Sheldrake, Peter Fenwick, Pim van Lommel, Charlie Tart, and so on. But what their view is, in fact, what I would describe as pure ideology. It's scientism rather than science. And what I do defend science and reason as well, but I don't put it on the basis of scientific materialism, which itself is an assumption about the way the world works. And the point here is that there are no impossible facts. And this was indicated by these three people, Alfred Russel Wallace, who, this is from his essay that I mentioned. To put the matter in a simple form, the asserted fact is either possible or not possible. If possible, such evidence as we've been considering would prove it. If not possible, such evidence could not exist. I mean, it's absolute knockdown argument. Larry LeShan, who sadly has just died at the age of 100, he said impossible events do not occur. So if a scientist is faced with the fact that an impossible event has occurred, the paradox must be resolved. And the danger is that we accept our definition of reality as a fact when it is in fact a theory or a way of looking at things. Hence, he says, if an event is a major violation of our theory about reality, a major revision of that theory is necessary. And that's exactly where we are at the moment, that there are violations of scientific materialism and a major revision of scientific materialism is required. And Jeff Kripal, in his new book, The Flip, he makes the same point. Impossible experiences he talks about. But he also says that logically our conclusions are a function of our exclusions. In other words, how we approach these matters, and that to dismiss something may be to miss its significance. And so I'm coming towards the end here, just indicating what we need is an evidence-based spirituality and a post-materialist science. And all this is all the evidence that we have, which points in this direction, including these veridical OBE reports, the parapsychology, children remember previous lives. And I think that the conclusion here is the eye of contemplation, which is the in Bonaventure, provides valid access to deeper structures and levels of reality. Hence, my conclusion is that we need an expanded ontology and epistemology and new methodologies, as in contemplative neuroscience. And this has very important implications for the image of the human being. Are we just a complex biological machine or a spiritual being? Is the future one of technotopic transhumanism, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum? And so the key issue for me is how best to maintain the integrity of the human in relation to rapid technological advance. And I won't read this piece by Michael Eisnerman because I haven't really got time to do it, but it's dissolving the absolute qualitative distinction between persons and things. And so scientism reduces persons to things. So what we need is a multidimensional model of the human being, including meaning and values, and what's called sapientia, wisdom, as well as empirical knowledge, scientia. And I've done a series of podcasts, which you can have a look at, Imaginal Inspirations, with the various people that you can see on here. So you can just look that one up. I have a book coming out next month called A Quest for Wisdom, which is 25 essays that I've written over the last 40 years, inspiring purpose on the path of life. So you can look that up online, Eon Books. And finally, here are some websites for you. And we can put this in any recording that's going out, but the most important one is the GalileoCommission.org, but also the Scientific and Medical Network and our various conference websites, mysticsandscientists.org, beyondthebrain.org. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to listening to the other speakers.
Thank you very much, David, for this very interesting report. So if our listeners today, the participants of this Worlds of Consciousness, would like to somehow participate in this Galileo report-based endeavor for a paradigm shift, what can they do? What would
they can go to GalileoCommission.org /join-us, and they can either join as a friend to support the initiative, or if they're academics, they can join as a professional affiliate. And we've got about a mailing list of professional affiliates, about 350, and therefore 450 friends. So we're over 800 people now, and rising every day.
Oh, that's good to know. So, David, we have just enabled the chat. Ananda, if you can show me the chat. The chat, it was disabled before, and I think you can also type in there the direct website where one can access it or join. Hans Werner appeared, and he already put the addresses so that you can directly click there. And yes, you are all invited to contribute in our chat function, because this really creates an energy. I can actually see you from here. I have a beautiful screen in front of me, so I can see every one of you. Of course, unfortunately, I can't, but I can see your comments. I see greetings from Japan. I see greetings from Taiwan, from so many different places. From India, yes. From Luxembourg. No, is this Luxembourg? Yes, it is. From Poland. So we have a quite international participation today all over the world. Those who got up early on this morning. And yes, so I love it if you put some hearts and some nicely smiley emojis. So this is also affecting my mood today. So it's a nice way to interact and combine our energy by being communicative. Now I see the chat is really starting to get on speed. Yes, thank you, David, very much. And we have already spoken about how our Institute of Existential Consciousness Research can contribute and maybe somehow cooperate with this wonderful project. And I really believe it's something historical, which is happening right now and which needs to happen to put consciousness again into the focus also of the scientific research. Yes, thank you very much, David. And I have just seen another participant of today joining the webinar Gem Room. It's Professor Jan Raak. Jan, are you there?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well, and we see your photo. Do you have some problems with your video?
No, wait a second. Should I, do I need to click here? Because I see you. My camera is on.
That's very good. That's very good. There is a symbol which looks like a webcam. Besides the microphone, you have this blue dot with a microphone and left. Yes. Now you shared you clicked the right one.
Right, I need to.
You have to go to the other side. Don't share your screen. It gives this infinity effect, which is probably a nice symbol of consciousness. Yes. Nice to see you, Jan. Yeah. How are you?
I am fine, and you? Right.
Yes, also it's a wonderful morning, and actually today is a full moon. This gives us a special energy. The moon was always a symbol for the human psyche, right, and for this female aspect of reality. So David has given a wonderful view on this, also on the historical aspect of consciousness research or the history of science, and it's a very it's almost difficult to imagine why did this philosopher in Padua, the head of the philosophical faculty, why didn't he want to look through the telescope? Kind of fear. So again, we're experiencing it in science nowadays to look through the telescope of consciousness, which is actually concerning ourselves. So you being a professor of physics, what is your experience in the scientific community? Are the people prepared to look through the telescope, the other professors? What is your experience?
Right. My personal experience is, and I don't want to be, in any kind of to be negative, but I think that people are not really prepared, because whenever you speak with somebody about quantum mechanics, what does it mean for, for kind of the way how we see the reality around us, people are mostly, trying to avoid any discussion of that type, because, many people, many of my colleagues are used to solve some problems for many years, kind of the same problems, numerical solution of some differential equation and so on, and anything which kind of could undermine, the way what they were doing for 20, 30 years, it's kind of the threat for them also. But I think the situation, what we see now, what is going on around, in the world, with the pandemic and all these things, I think it's pushing people to rethink, how to approach the science. And I think I really enjoy a lot the previous speaker, because I think it really goes into the root, what is science, what it constitutes from, or what is kind of the major criteria, how to what to accept as scientific and what not, and so, to my opinion, this kind of science is not, it kind of needs a huge revision, and especially in the terms of this local realism, objectivism, materialism, and so on. And I also I think that Galileo is very good example of when, to my opinion, kind of, it was the last time where the philosophy was more or less unified with kind of spirituality and kind of this realism. But since Galileo, we have this new age of modernism, where everybody kind of, where the society accepted without any doubts that the reality is materialistic. And this is something which is not really a threat for science to admit, that the materialism is not probably as sustainable as people thought, right? Because the quantum physics and many other observations, and I will speak about that in my lecture today, that there are facts which are clearly scientific facts which are clearly against this view, right?
Yeah.
But to somehow to convey this message, hard to say. I know there are a lot of people who are already awakened, so to speak, right? But the majority, the mainstream, I don't know.
Anyway, I have a lot of questions which I would like to ask you in this regard, but I first like to see what you have prepared today for us.
Okay. So I prepared the talk, so my view is more, as I'm a physicist, nuclear physicist, so I will be speaking today from the point of view of physics. And I like this. I have found somewhere this dialogue, which is kind of go to the essence of what I think is that there was some, discipline and master dialogue where the master say, by what light do you see? And the disciple replies that the sun by day and the lamp by night. And by what light do you see these lights? And the eyes. And by what light do you see the eye? The mind. And by what light do you see the mind? Myself. And you then are the lights of lights. Yes, that's I am. I think this is nicely summarizing the kind of this also essence of my talk, what really the consciousness is, how to, so to speak, how to, think what the reality is. And so let me go to the next page. As I said before, the scientific paradigm these days, kind of the prevailing worldview, is still based more or less on dogma based on Christianity. So it kind of shapes the belief system. I think we can see that what has been also mentioned by the previous speaker, that there is a lot of kind of people who are guarding, so to speak, the current knowledge in terms of like almost as an inquisition. And wait a second, I lost the screen. I don't see my slides. Marcus? Hello? Hello? Yes, I'm back. Is everything okay? I hope so.
Yeah. We just tried to put off your echoes. Someone in the chat was complaining that there's a low sound quality, but we have fixed it, and now you have back your presentation.
Okay,
I'm
very
sorry
good.
for this.
Right. So, I think that kind of the future is again in the kind of in the process of unifying again the science, kind of this materialistic objectivism, and so to speak, some of the spirituality, right? Some people are also forgetting that the PhD title, what kind of is a doctor of philosophy, right? So in the current, so to speak, scientific paradigm revolution, sorry, not the concurrent, but in the 20th century, I think we have already witnessed the big revolution at the beginning of 20th century, where kind of the classical view was broken apart, and the kind of the main ingredients of this revolution was the discovery of theory of relativity by Albert Einstein, obviously, who undermined kind of the Newton mechanics and the notion of the absolute space and absolute time. Then the quantum mechanics, there are many very well-known names, Rutherford, Planck, Bohr, Dirac, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, obviously Einstein, so on. They undermine kind of also this Einstein view in a way, right? Einstein was, I think, very important key person in the development of the quantum mechanics, but he never kind of accepted, but because of his way, how he criticized in his kind of, he kind of posted very ingenious question about the quantum mechanics. It leads actually to the discovery and shaping more of the quantum mechanics, right? And I think we should not forget that there are also things like Kurt Friedrich Gödel incompleteness theorem, which also kind of shows the limit of kind of this mathematical logic. And recently, kind of, I am also thinking about the, so to speak, paradigm revolution in 21st century, which comes not only in 21st century, but which comes also from the string theory, which I it's kind of rather complicated things, but some kind of outcomes are very interesting, like this holographic universe, which I think has, some good, interesting implication to the science of consciousness. And secondly, I think very close to understanding what the consciousness and mind matter problem is also the artificial intelligence development, right? So we have actually cooperation with some leading expert in the field of artificial intelligence, and I think it is amazingly good playground for understanding the consciousness, because there is this very old question whether or not the machine might have a chance to be conscious or not, and we have spent, or I think we are involved in not only discussion but also some developments. If you will be interested, we can discuss it after my talk. Right, so this slide only summarizes, there are some interesting issue related to special relativity, which kind of change completely our view of what is the space and time, because there is this time dilation which shows that the time flow is very relative to every observer. We have organized kind of 2 years ago some conference on this issue of special relativity and what goes beyond. And so, but this is not, the topic of my talk today. The general relativity cope with gravity, and then we have this quantum mechanics and the relativistic quantum mechanics, which is the quantum field theory. That's what we have been doing at CERN, right? So if we kind of summarize this knowledge into the concurrent mainstream view of what the universe is, then we have this cosmology, Big Bang, which is, where the 96% of the universe is made of dark matter and energy, and only 4% of ordinary matter and things like that. No antimatter. So this is kind of the concurrent picture, which is also very difficult to somehow to challenge. Although I think the many experimental evidences also shows that this is rather a dogma rather than a real scientific view. But that would be a technical issue. So let me go to what kind of goes along with this kind of scientific view based on physics is the local realism and objectivism. So our culture stems from the fundamental belief that kind of the matter, that the reality is matter, that the matter is primordial, and it comes from the Big Bang theory and so on, and the mind is a byproduct of matter self-organization, right? So these are the assumptions which nobody can somehow really, prove or disprove. However, there is the hard question. I think, previous speakers said that it's the hard problem. I somewhere found it's that people are calling that the fundamental problem of consciousness. And that's it, that nobody can really say how the consciousness arises from matter, right? So if one think more deeply about that, this question is a mystery. And I think it also tells me something, that actually materialism is irrational, right? And I will try to argue, so I found a lot of inspiration in the work of Rupert Spira. I don't know whether you know him. He said that the ultimate reality, the playground for the apparent mind-matter duality, is consciousness, right? And ignoring of this basic fact creates all unpleasant feelings of existential threat and leads to the conflict between communities and nations. And I think the very kind of, let's say, kind of philosophical view is that consciousness is only what is, right? And that's the old. Yeah, I have Werner. I have sent you. Okay, doesn't matter. I have sent a new version of my talk, but kind of this void, nothingness without form is kind of this I, and movement creates yam, right? And the yam is the mind. So I am is this, kind of pure consciousness, and yam is the mind, kind of what all the artificial intelligence can do, right? So what we can study, talk about, any experience is this part yet, right? And the I remains the ultimate reality which cannot be recognized by yet, right? So this is also kind of my view, because any experience, whatever we can speak about, feel, sense, and everything, that's the experience of consciousness, right? And we cannot really tell if there is something else than what we can experience, even kind of the thoughts, abstract thinking, we can also say that we are sensing the abstract thing. It's not the thoughts are not generated in that view by the brain, but kind of that the brain serves as an antenna, also receiver of the thought. So one can really think that everything what is the ultimate experience of consciousness, right?
Yes, Jan, this I am in many languages is one of the most fundamental statements one can do. And I see that you have 10 more slides, which is absolutely impossible in the -3 minutes, which
Okay.
you still have. Even for a quantum physicist, this would be a too big miracle to expect. But that's not a problem, because you will be also part of the lecturers in the seminar, Quantum Physics Towards Consciousness, expansions of quantum C towards consciousness, which we will start 9th of April. So because time is too short to complete the presentation, I just want to ask you one question, and maybe you can answer it in not more than 3 sentences. What do you do as a scientist, but as a human being? What do you do personally to expand your own consciousness?
Right. So what I do personally to expand, besides kind of the meditation and all these kind of things, I am also very much interested in expansion of the consciousness science also nowadays by the tools of this artificial intelligence. We have very good collaboration and so on. So that's kind of my concurrent status.
So thank you, Jan. Looking so much forward to your seminar on this same topic, where you have 1.5 hours to talk about the things. And I will never forget how we were. I had my first parachute jump from 5,000 meters above the earth, where you were also present. And this was one of the most consciousness expanding experience which I ever had.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Marcus. Also.
All right, thank you, Jan, so much, and hope you stay with us. Now we have a contribution from Dr. Chinmay Pandya, who is actually the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya, the Dev Sanskriti University, the second host of this Worlds of Consciousness. But unfortunately today, as it is a Purnima, it is a full moon, he has a lot of responsibilities. Therefore, he recorded this on his travels, and it's a greeting from India.
Chair of the event, Honorable Professor Marcus, who, apart from being a very close and dear friend of the Gayatri Parivar, is also one of the most learned, devoted, and inspiring leaders of a very unique tradition of science and spirituality working together. So to him and all my brothers and sisters from different parts of the world, good afternoon to all of you, and my respectful pranams from India. First of all, allow me to convey our heartfelt congratulations to Professor Marcus for a very successful and pristine beginning of this exceptional congregation. With his pioneering institution, a wonderful institution, we have cherished a very long, I would say, decade long, a strong and affectionate bond. And the news of this auspicious start on a very sacred day brings earnest happiness to our hearts, and we now look forward to continue providing all the possible supports to him to strengthen his academic endeavor even further. The theme that he has chosen for today's event is so pertinent and so timely, most wonderful. But before I dwell further on the subject, allow me to say few words on the contemporary circumstances which are most extraordinary. And I'm trying to send this message to you in those exceptional circumstances from the lap of Ma Ganga, foothills of mighty Himalayas. We are surrounded by them. And from Shantikunj, which is the headquarter of Gayatri Parivar, with 150 million members all across the globe. So these historic times in which I'm trying to send the message to you, and you know that we are witnessing a shift in the global consciousness because of a colossal pandemic and this travesty that has been momentous and ever seen by the mankind. And when we attempt to evaluate the current times in the background of such calamity, then the present times could easily be called as unprecedented. And in such times, the significance of the divine possibility that wisdom tradition offers and the significance of what we aim to accomplish through today's congregation, it becomes of utmost significance, more than ever before. And when we try to think about the spiritual dimension of the consciousness, then the way I see it is that our hunt, and when I say our, I'm referring to the humanity. So our hunt as humanity together for perfection is coming from a deep instinct to discover an eternal and absolute and timeless truth. And that comes along with a desire to manifest the fullness of my hidden possibilities. Because I believe that deep down, each of us is trying to search for an eternal and final freedom. And without reaching to a higher consciousness, the life continues to give us a feeling of imperfection and incompletion. Somehow, there is a feeling that something is missing. Because without knowing who I really am and what my purpose is in this vast existence, then everything that I do appears to be unfulfilling and futile. So naturally, the question comes that why this task of knowing who I really am is so difficult. Ideally, it should have been an effortless task. No one needs to tell a flower to be a flower or a dog to be a dog. Then why on earth human beings need to be gently cajoled towards embracing the humanity? After all, every other being in the universe appears to be in sync with its existence. We, on the other hand, seem to have lost our internal compasses. Our emotions and identities are frequently in conflict, clouded, fragmented. It is therefore right to ask that why we have lost our integrity. Why do we feel so divided? Why do we suffer so much with this internal conflict? And finding the answer to that question would take us to the spiritual dimension of the consciousness. Because I believe that one of the major reasons for our failure to attain an inner congruence and harmony is caused by the world that we are born into. Because our inner aspirations and the expectations of the world from us, they do not seem to be aligned together. It seems that world does not want us to be what we are born to be. Look at the ideals that society parades in front of us. And look at the way those ideals are enforced upon each and every individual, so that most of us would always be doomed to live dissatisfaction because we are not that person. And along with an obsession of what I should be, while being completely unaware of the fact what I was born to be. Knowing what I was born to be is a transformation of the consciousness. And I'm trying to run after a very pseudo and fake identity. So, apart from a split personality, a fractured self, and a very unhappy individual, what else such an obsession can offer? The first step in the journey of finding peace within takes place by the transformation of the human consciousness. And the reason I use the word consciousness is because what I just talked about, everyone is aware of it and everyone is desperate to find a solution. But unfortunately, our efforts are focusing only on the external measures, like changing the law, changing the regulation, changing the acts, which are important, but they cannot bring a total transformative change unless there is a change in the mindset. The change that I talk about is not the one that happens if I change externally, like I change my clothes or I dye my hair or I get tattooed, but it is the substantive change in our personalities that Gurdev mentioned as global transformation of consciousness. And I believe it is important to, when I mention Gurudev, Pandit Shyam Sharma Acharya, it is important to mention what he did. He was such a prolific scholar of modern India that he wrote more than 3,000 books in Hindi and Sanskrit. Imagine that. And also started a revolutionary movement called Thought Transformation Movement, Vichar Kranti Abhiyan, which now has more than millions of members and thousands of centers worldwide. And he talked about inner transformation, Atmanirman, as the key to change the consciousness of the world. It is important to quote what he said on the current circumstances, and that he was writing in 1987. He said that while the current circumstances, they look dark and gloomy, they should not bring fear or despair to us. Rather, we should embrace them like a call of action, because they are a sign that we are born at a time when entire mankind is called to accomplish a completely new level of collaboration between different nations, races, religions, sectors, society. For the first time in the history, all the people of the world are called to accomplish that they never accomplished before, which is to work together as one single family. And to accomplish that, you need to have a refined, elevated, higher consciousness. And at the end, as Professor Marcus has asked me to do, I would like to say a Rigvedic prayer that I have chosen for today's auspicious event. And this prayer is the cornerstone of dharmic traditions and also the founding philosophy of our organization called Gayatri Parivar. So this is the mantra of Gayatri that I would do. It is addressed to Ma Gayatri, who is the creator of the universe, giver of the life. And we ask her to guide us to the Sanmarg, which means the righteous, illumined path. And after doing the mantra of Gayatri, I would like to do the Shanti mantra or Shanti prayer of Yajurveda. Shanti means peace. And this prayer is asking for peace and harmony to radiate all over the universe, on this land and in the skies beyond, in the water, in the herbs, in the trees, and all in the manifestations of the nature. So I will do the Gayatri mantra, followed by the mantra, peace, Shanti mantra. Om Bhurvuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dheyo Yo Nah Prachodaya. Om Dev Shantirantarikshagum Shanti Prithave Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shantirvishve Deva Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvagvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantirede Om Shanti 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 Sarvarishta Sushantir Bhavatu. My best wishes to all of you for a very successful and pleasant end of this congregation. Best wishes to all of you for taking part, and pranams again from India.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandya from India, especially with your beautiful citation of the Gayatri mantra and the Shanti mantra. In the end, I remember this mantra very much because when I got initiated as a monk, this is actually something related to the second initiation, I was also initiated in this mantra, which since that time accompanies me. And I was so pleased when I came first time to the campus of the Dev Sanskriti University to see that any academic function is started with the Gayatri mantra, and it's also ended with the Gayatri mantra. So they are always aware, whatever they study, if it's computer science or Indian tourism, they have a big range of courses, bachelor, master, and also doctorates in their university. It's always based on the awareness that we are a conscious being, and that there is a deep origin of this consciousness, which in the Indian spiritual tradition is called Atma. So again, thank you very much for this wonderful spiritual blessings from India. And this brings me to our next speaker, which is Dr. Maika Steinborn. Actually, I know you also we know each other since very long time. Before you started to decide to study psychology, you're also deeply rooted in spiritual tradition and experience, and I know that you did your doctorate on the three gunas, which is the basis of the Indian psychology, and that's really very interesting to connect Western psychology and I would say almost like origins of psychology in such an old spiritual tradition like India. But I know your topic today is something very much connected to the here and now. So what's happening right now in psychology, I believe the big paradigm shift taking place everywhere is also starting or taking place in psychology. So I'm looking forward to your contribution today.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus, for that introduction. And my work focuses very much on how we can practically guide our awareness so that we can live our life the way that we want to live it, and so that we can live more fully and more consciously also ultimately. And the tools that psychology has to offer to that end are becoming more intricate over the years. And that's the topic of my talk today, the mind and psychology's third wave. There have been two waves in the last century in psychology. The first wave was wanting to make psychology observable scientifically. So that was very much focused on observable behavior. And then the second wave started integrating thought patterns and thought processes and restructuring thought patterns, and which is obviously a very important part of psychology. And this is very heavily focused on changing the mind, changing who we who we've been, so that we can become more into, or grow into the person that we'd like to be. And now this third wave in psychology is balancing this focus on change out with a focus on accepting. Because no matter how much we've changed and how much we grow, there will always be experiences that are challenging and difficult. And so the question remains, what do I do with these challenging experiences now? And that's where acceptance comes in, to not only focus on improving ourselves and growing and changing, but to also be able to embrace our experience, embrace reality, be present in reality, no matter what it's like at the moment, and to be able to go through challenging experiences without trying to control or change them all the time. And often what we do when we want to deal with challenging experiences is that we try to avoid them. We try to orient our days and plan our days out in a way that makes it less likely we'll experience something that is challenging. Or when we do, we fight against it, we try to suppress it, or we try to block it out of our awareness. We may even feel overwhelmed by it still, and like it's drowning out all other, everything else that is happening simultaneously. So this fight, it has a lot of negative consequences and a lot of costs. When we try to fight what we're experiencing, when we try to fight what our awareness is focusing on right now, right here, what we are conscious of in any given moment. And I would like to talk about how we can stop fighting, and also to motivate that. I would first like to talk about the costs of this fight and what the negative consequences are of constantly trying to fight. And so the first one is that it makes it hard to unwind, let go, and relax when we're always trying to control our experience, we're like always on guard that something may be coming up that we have to fight. So it's a constant state of vigilance and tension, which uses up a lot of energy and makes it almost impossible to relax, unwind, let go, and really experience. Secondly, a fighting experience also increases negative experience and emotions. And that may sound counterintuitive, but many studies have shown this, that when we try to avoid, we increase what we're trying to avoid. And studies have found this for feelings of nervousness, worries, anxiety, depression, trauma, and physical pain. And this happens because, well, first of all, when we try to avoid something or fight against it internally, we focus on it. And by focusing on it, our awareness of it increases. Also, when we fight it or suppress it, we're not looking at the root of the issue. And that makes it hard to ever really heal or deal with it in an appropriate way. And also, when we are avoiding certain experiences, we deprive ourselves of the opportunity to see how we could have coped with it. So by not going into a difficult or challenging situation, okay, it's first of all relieving, but it also removes any opportunity to see that we could have had the strength to deal with it, and we could have coped with that situation if we would have had the courage to face it. So it also deprives us of any opportunity to experience this kind of success that comes with coping and showing our strength and courage. And it also, and this is for me one of the biggest costs and negative consequences, is that it decreases our ability to experience in general. So our ability to experience and feel shrinks. The more we avoid, the more it shrinks. And it can come to a point where we are hardly able to really deeply feel and experience, because we've gotten so used to being out of touch with our experience. So if there's something in your life that gives you the feeling that you feel numb, or you feel like you're not really fully there, you're not fully conscious, you're kind of not able to feel deeply, you might want to see if this is because you're trying to avoid too much, fight and suppress, or if you're constantly tense and you have a really hard time letting go and just having just a good experience, or just a relaxed experience. You might want to see if that's because you're always tense from fighting. Or if there's a project and you're not progressing and you're stuck in this project, then you may want to see if maybe you're stuck because you are not taking the next step, because you're trying to avoid something that is connected to the next step in that project. So in summary, it's very common to try to avoid, but the costs and consequences are simply too high. And that's why the third wave in psychology emphasizes acceptance and something they call willingness. And acceptance means to acknowledge, embrace, and allow whatever we are experiencing, no matter what it is. Willingness means to just be ready to experience, to say that I'm ready to experience you. Dear experiences, whatever you are, I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm ready. And this doesn't mean that we are trying to just tolerate, or to it's not like saying, okay, well, I don't care anymore, but it's just saying, I accept it, I'm here for you. It doesn't mean we have to look forward to something either. And it doesn't mean that, well, it's sometimes also described as the opposite of trying to control experience. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't ever be proactive and take charge and say, I'm going to try to change this. It just means that we have to balance and make sure that both is in our life. On the one hand, controlling, being proactive, changing our thought patterns, and so that our consciousness can, like the speaker before us said, expand. And on the other hand, to also accept and allow our consciousness and our experience to expand by letting go of this very tight tension of controlling and just opening ourselves up for experience by acceptance. And studies show that people who are more accepting of challenging feelings and experiences, they have a higher quality of life, better mental health, they're better at their job even, and they spend less time worrying. And there's one study that really strikes me is people were asked to keep their hand in a bucket of ice cold water. And we had a pretty cold winter this year. So 2 weeks ago, I tried this. I put my hand in a water can on my balcony that was almost frozen. It was like a mixer, so I could still put my hand in the water. And I was really surprised how painful that was. So in this study, people were asked to do that. And the people who were accepting of that pain could keep their hand in the water twice as long as people who tried to suppress the pain or tried to divert their attention. They're fighting it. So this acceptance made the people who accepted stronger and more resilient to deal with that pain, twice as long. And sometimes also acceptance is compared to opening the window shutters of our house of life, to say, to allow the light and air of life to come in. And avoidance means, and fighting means shutting those window shutters. So I know that it's not always so easy to be accepting and welcoming of all experiences life has to offer. So in the last 2 minutes, I just want to share some points that make it easier to be that courageous, to be that daring, to really pursue the things that are important to us and say, no matter what challenges I will face on that way, I'm ready for it. I'm going for it because I know that this is the calling of my life. And the first thing is that, which helps in this quest, is to take on an observer's or a perspective on our experience. And it's interesting because the observer's perspective makes us kind of detached from our experience, but also very close. So it's kind of, we're close to the experience, but also detached from it in a way that we're observing it. And what helps here is to realize that we can really contain all experience, just like, and that we are not the experience. We are just observing it, just like the sky can contain all clouds, and just like a river can contain everything that's floating by. So yeah, you're not your feelings and thoughts, you are just holding them, and you can let them pass through you. And what also helps is not to be in a judging mood, to judge ourselves, but to just let our experience be what it is, to know that experience fade on their own. So we don't always have to do something to get rid of an experience. We can also just let it be and it'll fade. Also, these kind of challenging experiences and self-doubt, fears, they are part of human experience. It's not personal failure. That also helps to be more accepting. And last but not least, it makes it, like, being accepting makes it possible to do what is important to you. It makes it possible to stick up to your values, to stick up to your projects and face them and say, I'm going for it. So knowing that this is what will make it possible for me to follow my dreams is super motivating for acceptance and embracing life and opening ourselves up for life. And I'd like to close by quoting Stephen Hayes. He says, life is a choice. The choice here is not about whether or not to have pain. It's whether or not to live a valued, meaningful life. You've had enough suffering. Get out of your mind and into your life. Thank you so much for your attention. If you want to stay connected, I have a YouTube channel and I upload once a week similar topics like this one. I'd love to meet you there. And thank you to the organizers for including me in this event. And I would now pass the word back to Markus.
Thank you, Micah, so much. This was really very, very inspiring to listening to this practical psychology, and it feels so much true that the more we try to avoid the experience, the more we narrow down our consciousness, and the more we expand those areas which we don't want to look at it. So we are almost like walking through a Porzellanladen.
Oh yeah.
We're almost walking like through a room where everything is some expensive, ceramics placed, and try to not touch anything, and life becomes hell. And yes, experience life to the fullness which it actually offers to us. This is definitely, I believe, a very strong key to expand our experience, to expand our consciousness. And I think this is what in the spiritual traditions, it's called life energy, like prana or chi. It's a possibilities which you have, which are in your activities and within your experience. And yes, I was really very happy to hear this. Very practical, and I think you can share your YouTube channel here in the chat.
Oh yeah, I'll do that. Maybe once the next speaker is up, and then I know how I can take the time to figure that out, and I'll share the link. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Micah. Hope to see you again in one of our events, and maybe give you a little more time to go deeper into this very practical and spiritual psychology. Thank you. I think you actually, when you did your doctorate, Professor Wallach was also there when you had to defend it. So this is by chance. We didn't arrange it, but therefore I'm coming to my next our next speaker. Harald Wallach, who is, I think, psychologist by nature. He's a worldwide renowned researcher on mindfulness, and always taking consciousness in considerations in all scientific areas he's touching on. He also had a professorship on the evaluation of complementary therapies. It's very interesting because complementary therapies and medicine hardly work without consciousness. And Professor Wallach, are you here?
I'm here, but it looks as if my video connection doesn't work. Should I try again?
Yes, try again. We want to see you.
So let me get out and in again and see what happens.
Yeah, don't worry. So yeah, that's a little technical difficulties which are absolutely normal in this kind of online conferences. But it's still the advantage of doing it in such a way is that so many more people can participate, and it's, we can sit at home and just connect in such a way. And I really like the activities in the chat, because people are expressing there, but also some very, very beautiful comments are made. And unfortunately, I would like to answer them, but I cannot type here. So, but yes, keep on going.
So here I am.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me without my headphones on?
Yes, very strongly and clearly.
Okay, because then I take them off. It's probably easier for everybody if I don't look like a man from Mars, I think.
Absolutely.
So, should I start?
Yes, you shall start. But before starting, I have one question, because
okay.
Later speaker Satchidanand Swami.
Sorry, what did you say?
A later speaker of today, Satchidanand Swami, told me that you have spoken with him about what we can do is, like, if we're sitting on the seat of consciousness and we see the world, we just have to turn around the seat to observe the origin of consciousness. Is something like you once said, or I would like to hear it in the way as you would express it.
All right, so let me start. Hello, everybody. I have, minus 27 minutes or something like that, or minus 8 minutes, but I have 15 minutes to present 3 complicated topics to you.
Yes.
Science, spirituality, consciousness. Actually, it's consciousness, spirituality, and science on the program, but I take it from the backside. So let me invest 5 minutes on each of those topics, so we can see how they might be connected. Let's start with science. Here is my working definition of science. As you probably know, Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, once said, definitions come only once we have a full understanding of something. Now, we don't have a full understanding of either of these topics, so we will have to go with working definitions. And my working definition of science is a collective enterprise of humanity to understand the world, its functions, probably make it useful, and avoid as many errors as we can. So this is a very pragmatic and also an operational definition. It doesn't say what science is telling us, it's what it's doing. Because science is the process of understanding the world. Now, how do we normally go about that? And what is it that people think that science is? For that, I think it's important to make a distinction. As David Lorimer already pointed out, there is 2 ways of looking at science, at least 2, maybe more, but 2 generic ways. One is what I call science 1, and this is what scientists do over their daily business. They try to make experiments, they try to analyze their data, they try to publish their data, they get rejections and they have to rewrite their papers. They go to conferences, they give talks, they lecture to students, they supervise their PhD students, all in the process of trying to understand some tiny little bit of the world. That is science one, the daily business of science. Now, we are not automatons, we are no robots. So we all come to this business with a background of cultural, religious, political understanding. And that feeds into that process of science as well. And through that cultural historical development that in the West has been going on at least since 1100, probably before that if we take the Greek period together, there is also a worldview that comes out of a joint venture, as it were. And that is what I call science too. The worldview that has been creepily, probably even unknowingly, been developed by a lot of scientists over the ages. David Lorimer has pointed out to various important books that carry that idea. And I've written about that in the Galileo report a lot, so I'm not going to mention that all. But one thing is important, I think. Since the Enlightenment period, that is roughly at the end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th century, science and political activism has been joining together to free humankind from bondage, from political bondage, from a religious ideological bondage, and set human beings free, as it were. And part and parcel of that was also a development of a worldview that implicitly is materialistic. That is what Jan Rack and others have pointed out. So this science too, which we have, the worldview of science, is actually a complex conglomerate of scientific findings, extrapolations of those findings, mixed together with cultural and political decisions. And very often when people talk about science nowadays, or the scientific worldview, then what they mean is this background idea of how we think the world operates. And that is predicated on a materialistic, often reductionistic viewpoint. And this viewpoint presupposes, as David Lorimer has nicely shown, that matter, our brain, actually produces consciousness. That is nothing but a presupposition that comes out of that long tradition. And I was very pleased to hear Robin Collingwood mentioned, who plays a prominent role in my Galileo report, because Robin Collingwood pointed out to what we call absolute presuppositions. Presuppositions we make without even being aware of them. And these absolute presuppositions, and one of the most powerful in current cultural and scientific thinking, is this materialism. The idea that matter is primary and consciousness derived from it. There is actually nothing in science that could be used to support such a point. Put differently, there is no scientific evidence that this view is actually true. It's a presupposition we make. It's a powerful presupposition and it's an omnipresent presupposition, but nevertheless it's a presupposition. I like to use a historical example to make the working of presuppositions obvious. And that example is how William Harvey discovered the heartbeat. Most people know that around 1620 something, William Harvey, the physician to the English king, discovered a circulation in the heartbeat. Why was that so? That was so because previously the Aristotelian Galenic worldview assumed the heart was a convection warmer, a warmer that warmed the blood that goes up to the brain and the brain cools it and then it falls down again, right? So circulation explained, no necessity for a heartbeat. Harvey didn't believe that. So he did some very ugly experiments vivisecting dogs and other animals. And so while he was looking at a live heart beating, he saw there was actually a heart beating. And from there he derived the heart is a pump and there must be a heartbeat, which in fact is there, as we know. When he published that, one of the most famous physicians of his time, Emilio Parisano, said, well, there is no heartbeat. We cannot hear that in Venice. If they can hear it in London, happy may they be, but we cannot hear that heartbeat in Venice. He actually wrote that in 1638 or something. Here you see a presupposition at work, something which we think is true. In that case, the Galenic Aristotelian physiology prevents us from seeing obvious phenomena. And that is the same now today with that materialist worldview. This materialism prevents us from seeing a lot of phenomena, and that is both the function and also the restriction of a worldview. So science 2 is actually not warranted by science 1. So the worldview, the scientific worldview, is an extrapolation. And consciousness as a obvious phenomenon is very difficult to explain by that worldview. Now let's turn to the second topic, spirituality, because that is even more complex to explain by that worldview, and that is also the reason why spirituality and anything to do with religious or spiritual ideas is excluded from the current scientific enterprise, I would say. Thereby, we are actually neglecting what I think is one of the most important human aspects. It's just as important as sexuality, and it's exactly tabooed as sexuality was when Freud pointed its finger to it at the beginning of the 20th century. But I think spirituality is actually a very important source even of scientific insight. Let me explain that. The core of spirituality, I would say, is what I call a spiritual experience. A spiritual experience is a holistic insight into reality. I think I have enough time to present you with two examples. Let me use one which comes from St. Ignatius of Loyola. Here is oh, you can't see that probably because it's the other way around. Here is the autobiography of Ignatius of Loyola. And he writes in that autobiography, which I'm trying to translate to you, the following. When he was only 1 mile from Manresa, he sat down there in deep contemplation. And as he sat there, the eyes of his mind or of his understanding began to open, not as if he had an apparition, but it was as if the understanding and the insight into many things about the spiritual life, but also about the truth of faith and the human nature were given to him. This was accompanied by such a big enlightenment that everything looked as if it was presented in new light. And that, what he discerned at that time, cannot be presented in singularities, although there were very many. Only that he had such a big clarity in his mind that if he takes the whole course of his life together after 62 years, and everything that he has received from God during that time, and if he takes everything into one, so he would take this not to be as much as he had seen in this singular moment. This experience was so impressive that his whole mind remained fully enlightened, and it was to him as if he had been a different person, and as if he had received a different mind, different from what he had previously. This is one example that comes from the Christian Catholic tradition of enlightenment. This is also to counter the idea that Christianity is only to do with dogma. I think this is complete rubbish, actually. Sorry, Jan, for saying that. This is complete rubbish, because there is a lot of mystical tradition in every religion. In the Hindu tradition, of course, in the Zen tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, but also in the Christian tradition. This was a Christian example, and had I more time, I could give you a couple of more examples, which I won't. But I want to point out one thing. This spiritual experience is the basis of every religion, I would hold and contend. And out of that comes insight. Now, this insight is actually the very basis of what scientists also need if they want to understand the world. You have seen in Jan Rack's presentation beautiful formulae, very condensed formula about the structure of the world. Now, where do these formulae come from? You don't find them out there. You don't find them in nature. You don't find them in your data. You have to have them to understand your data. And the insight that scientists used, Heisenberg, Einstein, big scientists, is actually the very same insight that you find in spiritual experience, I would hold. So there is one connection between spirituality and science, the deep insight into reality. Now, when we use spirituality to understand about the world, we are using our consciousness. It is our consciousness we are using, both in scientific insight, when we model, for instance, data and find data structures and formula. And it is consciousness we use and have as our vehicle when we have spiritual experiences. So in fact, consciousness is the link between science and spirituality. This brings me to the third topic, consciousness. Consciousness is the link between understanding, both in science and in spirituality. While in spirituality we go, as it were, deep inside ourselves to understand normally about our own life, but also about the world in general terms. We go on a quest of meaning making, I would say, of understanding. But we also go on a quest of search for truth, for reality. What you can see back there, here, is a painting of the Chinese letter for truth. I bought that many years on a meditation retreat, and ever since it has been in my office. Because truth is at the core of science and at the core of spirituality. Now, spirituality is revealing a very complex world, a manifold world, and there is no single way of containing that. That is probably one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why we have so many different expressions, so many different religions. But the same is true for science as well. There is no single thing such as the scientific worldview or what we know as the truth. We know many truths, and some of them are conflicting, like quantum theory and relativity theory. But we are always embarking on that journey towards truth. We do that using consciousness, either way. And we need consciousness to understand about the deep structure of the world. So consciousness is co-primary, I would say, at least co-primary, if not primary, if we want to get a rational understanding both of science and the world and of spirituality. I take it my time is over, right?
Almost.
Sorry?
Almost.
Okay. Well, I'm finished anyway, because that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that consciousness it's a little bit like a hinge around which both hinge, right? So a door which opens to one direction, which is our inner world, that we have seen in that example of the spiritual experience of Ignatius of Loyola, and we see in many, many other examples. And towards the other side, it's the deep structure of our reality that science is trying to make sense of. And good scientists actually always use conscious insight into the deep structure of the world if they want to understand what it's all about. And I think that's the link. The link is consciousness. So we need consciousness to understand both science and spirituality, which means consciousness cannot be get rid of. Not theoretically, not by understanding how the brain produces it, because we need it to understand the brain and science. So I think that's it. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much. I think thank you also for accepting the challenge to within 15 minutes cover this kind of complexity. But I think the answer is very clear that science and spirituality connecting through consciousness means if you go deeper in science or if you go deeper within spirituality, probably at one point you end up in the same root, the same source of those. I remember, I don't know who was it who said, if you drink from the cup of science, you become an atheist. But if you drink it completely, you find God at the bottom of it. Do you know?
No, I don't know who said that. I think it was Heisenberg or someone. It was one of the physicists.
Yes, I think it was Heisenberg. But I think the same is true for spirituality, because if you just drink superficially from the cup, you end up maybe as a religious fundamentalist. But if you deeply drink to it, you come to the same root like if you drink from the cup of science. So I think this was a great insight which you were talking about. And yes, thank you again. See you back in the end of the of this conference, if possible, because then we can share again our impressions.
At this morning's conference, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Christian. You're sitting in front of a beautiful spiritual picture.
Hello, Marcus. Yes, it's a pleasure.
Hello.
To have
nice to have you with us. Huh?
It's a pleasure to have such a nice background. Very inspiring.
Yes. I think it's a painting I know very well. So you're here today to share some very practical insights, because we can talk a lot about consciousness, but how do we express our consciousness? And I believe it's through the way how we experience the world and the way how we react on the world. How do we act, actually? You can see our consciousness partially by the actions. So I think this is a topic which you choose today, and you have lots of experiences being very active in this world, starting big projects on all different kind of levels. So looking forward to listen to you.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Marcus. I have also some presentation prepared to guide us through the process. The topic is positive thoughts and positive actions. I had the pleasure to come in touch with this topic when I was 15 years old, so I had the chance to use it quite a lot since then in my life. And what I would like to talk about today is basically these 4 points. It's to live the highest vision of yourself, and then to increase the vibration and the positivity to make this happen, and to build positive habits. And also the question, why do we forget all those things sometimes? And maybe this helps to not forget it at all. So the first point, live the highest vision of yourself. Why is this important? Because how do you measure whether a thought or an action is positive or not? You have to have something as a reference. And the highest vision is not just a good reference, it's also a great goal by itself. So what is the highest vision of yourself? We need to ask ourselves this question first, because we may have some visions of us, but some are maybe more positive and more intriguing and more you're more attached to that, and some are less. So question yourself, what is the highest vision that you can see of your life and yourself? And sometimes when we have a very high vision of us, the question comes up, is this really possible for me? Is it maybe too much, and maybe I cannot achieve that? And yeah, we have something in life that helps us to go forward, and this is also our suffering, because sometimes we need the suffering to be open for change, because maybe we think, okay, the life is good as it is now, but then a difficult situation arises where we have a difficult time, and this suffering, as bad as it feels, can be the fuel that drives us to the next step. So what do we need to make this highest vision of ourselves possible? So I suggest to increase the vibration and the positivity in us. Yeah, how we can do that? It's not so easy, especially when you have a difficult situation. Well, first, you need to see the positive opportunities. Because if you don't see positive opportunities, you cannot act and you cannot decide for that. So the first task is to really see the positive opportunity or opportunities, and then act according to the opportunity. So we need to have some braveness in us to really do it then. And what are the positive opportunities? Sometimes we have a hard time to see that. Well, let's break that down. First is, like Micah also said, the accepting part. So be thankful for the present moment. It's not by accident in the English language called present moment, because it's really a present. It's a gift that you have this current moment. And please assume that there are positive possibilities. That means when you believe that there are positive opportunities, then you already are more into peace with the current situation, because it's not all just negative or difficult. So assume that there are positive opportunities. And then what question do we ask then? Yeah, we want to see the positive opportunities, positive options. So the obvious question is, what are those positive options in this situation, in this current situation, where we might see negative sides, and what are the positive options? This is a question we need to continuously ask ourselves again and again. And what is important for getting valuable, good answers for that is, we need to stay open. That means don't think you already have the answer. Because if you think you have the answer, whatever the answer is, you're not open anymore. It's like when you get something with your hands are full, and you cannot take anything more. So don't think you already know everything. Stay open to the unexpected, to the answer that you might not have discovered yet. And then connect to your consciousness, to a higher consciousness, to a higher being, which is basically, I would describe as love and wisdom in simple words. And then wait for what comes through the silence and the deep inner peace, because this silence and deep inner peace, it's like a lake that is very flat. When you have this stillness in yourself, then you're very sensitive, and you can easier discover what is this message from the silence that comes with this kind of feeling of knowledge, and you just know it is the right thing. Well, when you get an answer, then it might be something that you didn't expect. And with this answer, there comes a chance that another question comes up in yourself. So what you do is, as a next step, you ask the next question. And so you do that as long as needed to have a good understanding of what this positive opportunity is, and what the results are and the next steps are, so that your mind also is in the boat, so that you see the positive opportunity with the results as far as possible as you can see. And basically those 4 steps are a help to see and recognize the positive opportunities, and then you can act based on that. So this was a process to see the opportunity and act. So next, to do that, or to help that, we can build some positive habits in our life. For example, when you look at this picture on the left side, it's like a chess game. It looks like lots of limitations, clear rules, and on the right side, it's a chaos figure, more like life is really. And the question is, where is your focus in life? Do you focus more on these limitations in life than on the rules and borders? Or do you focus more on the many positive opportunities that are also there in your life? So if you want to increase your ability to see these positive opportunities, you can build some habits. For example, nourish and hold positive beliefs about you and about your life, because all your beliefs that you have, conscious or unconscious, they will act like a filter in your life for your thoughts also. So if you have the belief, for example, that you see the positive opportunities, then the chances are higher that you will identify that and that you will have thoughts and feelings connected to these positive opportunities. And what is very helpful is the transition period from awake state to falling asleep. So when you have these positive beliefs about yourself, especially when you're just about to fall asleep, that's a very good time to program yourself. And this is kind of the basis to colorize, to influence your thoughts. So another thing is that you keep a positive state of mind, because when whatever circumstances are in your life, they are as they are. You can accept them or not, but they are as they are. But what you can change is your reaction to the situation, and your reaction is based a lot of your state of being. So if you have a positive state of being, seeing the positive opportunities, you will have a better reaction to the circumstances, and then you can act in a better way and increase the positivity in your life. And a very common thing is to be just fully present in the here and now, because then you have more choices in your life, see more possibilities. And to do that, also breathing is helpful, especially if you deeply breathe in and then slowly breathe out. This alone can also positively influence your heart variation rate and your state of mind, and be in the observer state, from the state of the consciousness. So you are not your breathing and feelings and thoughts, but you can observe your breath, your feelings, and your thoughts. And if you meditate every day, you increase your ability to be in this observer state and observe what's going on in your life and see the positive possibilities and possibilities for actions. So why do we still forget to stay connected? So I can say from my life, I had the experience that this process worked very beautifully in many situations. And then I still discovered that sometimes, or often of the times, I just forget to be in this connected state, even if I discovered it is so helpful. So I asked myself the question, how is it possible that I forget again and again? And I thought, okay, when I'm in this connected state, what brings me out of this really connected state? And what I found out is, I'm probably distracted by a perception in my life. And then from this perception, I get further distracted, and so on and so on. So it helps to remember the origin, which is this connected state that you find or can find in yourself. It's similar to a tree. So that the stem of the tree is the connection, and then if you go in the branches, it's a symbolizing for the possible directions your consciousness can go, and therefore your life experience can go. But it all comes from the same origin. At some point, you have this connected state of mind. So when you remember this connection, so you can also say to remember God, then you carry the origin, this connection to God in you, And then you can also say, okay, when you have the intention to find God in you, then you have the intention to find this connection in you. And instead of God, you can also say, find the Krishna in you, the Christ in you, the Buddha, the Allah, the love, the wisdom, the source, whatever you name it. It's basically this inner connection that you can find in you. And it's also a way to find yourself, because that's part of you. It's part of your true self. And therefore, in this way, you find the positive thoughts in you, and then you can easily speak and act positive according to your thoughts. So in summary, the idea is first to strive for your highest vision of yourself, and to do that, to increase the vibration and positivity. And you can do that with things that have a long-term effect, here in blue, and you can do that doing things that have an immediate effect in the here and now in red, or both in violet. So holding and nourish positive beliefs about yourself is a very good basis for your whole life. Do that often is helpful. And then just assuming or just believing, it's also a belief that you can hold about yourself, that there are these positive possibilities. And to stay in a positive state of mind is really a good basis to search these positive possibilities. And in the best way is that you let yourself be guided by your inner vision to see those possibilities. And it's basically a way to remember that you are connected to the source. And when you are connected to the source, is already a good reason to stay positive, because what can go wrong when you are connected with the source of life? Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for the invitation. I hope I could have added some practical point of views from my own life experience.
Thank you, Christian. Do you see how the tree, which is in the back of you, is growing also here into my room?
Yeah, right. It's the same tree from the principle.
So, yeah, thank you so much. I think this was already kind of you can call it the yoga of action, isn't it? Because yoga means to connect yourself to the deep source within. This is maybe one translation of the term yoga, and how to live this inner connection, this awareness of consciousness in one's actions. I think that is so important in the times we're having now, where everything, even on the planet, how we survive as a humanity will depend on our actions. Thank you so much, Christian. And this is a very good bridge to our next speaker, who is not only a speaker, but he's a very deep practitioner also. Welcome, Eddie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Marcus.
Thank you for getting up so early.
No problem.
But I think that's normal. What's the time in the United States right now?
It's only 6 a.m. It's not so early.
Okay, that's nothing for a yogi.
Nothing.
I think it's a normal time for you to get up. We met last time, 2005, when I visited your yoga studio in the heart of Manhattan in New York, and I was very, very much impressed. And when I followed your work in between, and I saw that you on one side, you were a very practical man. You're a yoga teacher. You're deeply in meditation and study the ancient Sanskrit texts. But you're also connected to science, especially to neuroscience. And in our conversations, I saw that you really very deeply rooted in both approaches. So you choose something as a topic today, which I think everyone can appreciate very much, because we all have to breathe, even if we are not aware about. So how to use the breath and awareness about the breath for approaching universal consciousness.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for your very kind introduction, Marcus. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm in the hallway of my apartment building right now because everyone's asleep inside still. In Hindu tradition, we always give a little bit of an invocation before we begin speaking. So I'll say a short prayer to Patanjali, who is the codifier of the yoga system. Om Abahu Purushakaram Shankachakrasi Dharinam Sahasra Shirasam Shwetam Pranamami Patanjalim. Om Srimate Anantaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha. So thank you very much, Marcus, for this invitation, and also to Sri Sachinandana Maharaj for your friendship and also for the introduction to Marcus. It's a pleasure to be here. In the next 15 minutes, I will discuss a little bit about the concept of the individual breath and the cosmic breath. So there are a few things to cover first as a basis. In the Hindu tradition, all of the practices that are done within yoga are done within a particular context. In America, for example, we're very concerned with things like rights and individual rights. And of course, rights are important, human rights are important. But in the Hindu tradition, it wasn't so much rights that were the thing that was considered important as a human being, but responsibility. The things that we it's our duty or responsibility to follow and observe for the gift of or the privilege of a human life. So we have to look at all of the practices that come within the Hindu tradition, and I'm putting yoga into this category, of course, as something that are going to fall into a particular context. And the context is going to be the four aims of human life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And very roughly and very briefly, dharma are going to be the responsibilities that we have, as well as all of the ideas about duty, things that are right, things that are wrong, as well as laws and religion and things like that. Artha are going to be the skillful means that we use in order to fulfill dharma. And we can also say dharma is purpose. And then kama is going to be the fulfillment of our desires. And then moksha is liberation. One thing that we have to make sure of it as we travel through this journey is that the context of these four aims of life, of purpose, of means, of desire, and of liberation, are approached through this idea that our individual life is not just an individual life. Otherwise, all of those strivings can only be for the attainment of either amassing personal wealth or power or fulfilling greed or fulfilling desires that might not be helpful towards humanity or even towards us. Okay, so this is the first thing, the idea that all of these practices are done within this context of the four aims of life. And then the second thing that we look at is the idea of the universal or the cosmic rather, and the individual. So in Sanskrit, we have a word chit, which means consciousness. It also means existence. Consciousness exists, existence exists, and then things happen within existence. Consciousness itself as an absolute will be called chit. But then we have, and this is again this sort of this cosmic reality, this eternal principle. But then we have individuated states of consciousness, and that's what we are experiencing now as living beings, that we have our own individual experience of being, we have our own experience of pain, of pleasure, of gain, of loss, of relationships, of knowing, of unknowing, of questioning, etc., the entire range of human experience. And the entire range of human experience is going to be individuated, and it's going to be slightly separated off from a cosmic experience. And the place where, the quote-unquote place where we experience this is in our mind. And so the activities that are occurring in the mind which are basically experiences, fall under the category of chitta. So chitta is the field of experience, something that we in the West call the mind. But in the Hindu traditions, it's simply a field of experience. So chit, which is this cosmic existence, or this eternal, infinite, unlimited, undifferentiated potential, in the individual becomes chitta, with the addition of the syllables or the letters T and A, chitta. So chit is consciousness, chit is existence, and chitta is the field of individual potential for experience to occur. And within the chitta are occurring activities, and these are called vrittis. Vrit means to roll, to move, to collect, and a vritti, therefore, is an activity which is repetitive in many different types of ways. So we then have a chitta, or a field, which is a limited reflection of chit, absolute pure existence. And we live in this chitta, and we identify with the vrittis, the activities within it, and we take those activities to be who we are. And when we take those activities to be who we are, then we're not truly with a sense of being of self. We're not truly existing with just a sense of being, but we're existing with a sense of becoming, of change, of looking for identity and trying to fill in the blanks because we don't truly know who we are. And so this particular conundrum sets the stage for something that is called dukkha. Ka means space. Space is what we exist within. And du means something which is limited or fractured or difficult. So dukkha, commonly translated as suffering, is when we are in a constricted, limited existence, a constricted state of being that we are identifying with. And so the Hindu philosophies, whether it's Sankhya or Vedanta or the many different types of Vedanta, all exist for the sake of answering that question. How do I remove myself from dukkha? The dukkha of having a body and a mind and emotions, the dukkha of the elemental forces that we are subjected to, whether it be disease or hurricanes or earthquakes or bad weather, or the dukkha we have from existential crisis, or from pulls of the planets, the effects of unseen things. How do we free ourselves from all of these? One of the answers, because there are of course many answers to this, but one of the answers that yoga gives is that we need to begin to align ourselves with the potential for an expanded experience that is innate within us. So we are, and this is something that the entirety of the Hindu tradition agrees with, of a macrocosm and a microcosm, that we are individual reflections of the macro. And so that everything which is in the macro is attainable or understandable through the micro, which is us. And in the yoga tradition, there's a very specific way that they go about achieving that. And the yoga system is called the Yoga Vidya and also Yoga Abhyasa. Yoga Vidya means the science of yoga, and Yoga Abhyasa means the practice of yoga. So that we do very specific practices which have been delineated through the science. And the science means that there are very clear definitions given about what something means and how it should be done. And then we follow those things, they have a particular effect. So what we're discussing today is breath, and how the breath is our individual breath is a manifestation or reflection of a larger principle. So the word which is used in Sanskrit for breath is prana. And prana means that which causes something to move. We often think of prana, for those who do yoga, as energy or as breathing or something like that. But the actual roots of the word is pra-ana. Ana is a vayu, and a vayu is something which moves, and pra is something which is coming before or causes that movement. So everything which is existing in the universe has been caused to move somehow into manifestation. And the equilibrium that it has arisen from is a pattern. And so the pattern which causes the initial movement isn't just one single pattern, but it's an infinite number of patterns which are overlapping and overlapping and overlapping and overlapping with each other. So if you imagine a very clear lake without a ripple in it, and you take a small pebble and you throw that pebble into the lake, very gentle ripples will start to occur, coming out and coming out and coming out. And that pattern becomes repetitive as it moves outward. And then you throw another pebble in, and then you have more ripples coming, and those ripples then begin to overlap with the initial ripples. And so now you have a new pattern, which is repeating it and repeating it and repeating itself. And if you have an infinite number of pebbles being dropped into this pond, which in the pond here, of course, is an analogy for consciousness, all of these patterning ripples begin to take form. And so the forms that we experience and that we perceive around us are basically just patterns that are occurring from that which has caused things to move in this greater field of consciousness. And then, because of our limited sense organs and our limited bandwidth of perception, we identify with these things as being real, and then we form relationships with them, either pleasant or unpleasant. So what the yogis say is that that which has caused all things to move is perceivable through the unraveling of the patterns. So that if you can begin to slow your patterns down and slow down the big waves of the patterns, you can start to perceive something which is more subtle. And breath is one of the ways that we do that. So if we look at some simple patterns, and I'll finish this up in about 3 minutes because I only have 15, as we all do this morning. If we look at patterns, let's look at a pattern of nature. The planet is rotating on its axis, and we're spinning around the sun. All the planets are moving in cycles, and sometimes it's day and sometimes it's night, meaning sometimes our planet is tilted towards the sun, and sometimes our planet is tilted away from the sun. When it's tilted away from the sun, it's dark, and we call that night. Now, we have within us certain structures in our brain that are tracking that movement. We have it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's a deep structure in the brain which is tracking the movement of the sun through our eyes. And our retinas are actual brain tissue that has grown out directly from the skull, touching the world around us. So through light hitting the eyes, our brain knows when it's day, when it's night. And when it's day, we release certain hormones that cause us to be awake. And when it's night, we release certain hormones that cause us to be asleep. So this is a pattern of nature that we follow along with. And our breath is one of those patterns as well. So our breath is going to determine certain psychological states and emotional states and all types of things like that. Now, normally the breathing pattern that we have is autonomic, meaning it just happens spontaneously. But the yogis investigated that our autonomic nervous system is not really automatic. It's semi-automatic, meaning sometimes we can control it and sometimes we don't control it. But the more we can engage consciously with this automatic pattern that occurs in nature, we can begin to unravel it. And so that when we begin to control a semi-automatic practice or process or pattern, then that pattern itself becomes conscious. So turning something which is unconscious into a conscious act allows us to engage with the pattern and understand certain things about it. And certain things we understand are the dharmas, or the innate characteristics of breath, and how breath is linked to consciousness. So for the yogis, they use the breath, which is a semi-automatic pattern, in order to begin the first stages of accessing the deeper levels of understanding. Now, when the mind becomes completely quiet and all of the ripples have calmed down, then Patanjali says, who's one of the codifiers of yoga, Ritambara Tatra Prajna. Then in that state, the Ritambara, Bara means to shine, and Ritam means the cosmic laws. So we have our individual things that we follow, which this is Dharma. And then there are cosmic things that become the cosmic laws that manifest in us individually as Dharma. So Dharma, individual, and innate characteristics of duties and responsibilities, but Ritam is the cosmic. And so then when the mind becomes completely quiet through the calming of all patterns, through gaining control of automatic functions, then Ritambara, the cosmic shining laws, are present in the field of our mind. And then all that we experience in our individuated field of Chitta is Ritam, the universal cosmic patterns or potentialities shine forth in that field. And that becomes our identification and releases us from suffering.
Thank you,
Marcus has returned. So
Thank you.
Later on today, we'll have a little practical example of that with the breathing practice. And but I'll conclude there.
Thank you so much. Because if there wouldn't be the restraining time factor, then we would immediately invite you now to do a yogic breathing exercise with us. But as you said already, tonight at the 6 o'clock Central European time call, which is perfect for the Americans and also for the Europeans, you will be guiding the meditation and taking us also through a breathing experience. And those who cannot be there tonight because it's already middle of your night, for them we will have the recording later on our website. So again, thank you, Eddie, and it's a wonderful bridge also to Satchidananda Swami, who is also a yogi of a different kind, and he will lead us into the final meditation of this journey, which I already described in the beginning. So Satchidananda Swami, very much welcome here. I know you had a very busy schedule the last days and you are a world traveler, normally reaching 10,000s of people worldwide with your lectures, with your retreats, and also with your books. I know you're just finishing a wonderful book on meditation. But today it's your task to get us into the deep space of consciousness.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity to be with all of you. I must say I was thrilled by listening to the presentations, and I was overcome with joy to see Eddie. And I acknowledge the great austerity which each speaker went through to put so much content on the subject of consciousness into 15 minutes. I would like to immediately go into my subject. We heard one of the speakers saying we need an evidence-based spirituality. I believe evidence for consciousness is possible when we consider the two directions in which consciousness can be active. I appreciated very much the analogy of which was used in connection with consciousness, the door, which can open outside or inside. And I will try to open the door inside to all of you so that you can experience consciousness, or to say it in a different way, experience the experiencer. This is possible by stepping back, and I very much appreciated one quote from the Vedic canon, which Professor Yag used. I have translated it into a simple language. Who or what observes the world? An initial answer is the I. But let us step back a little bit more. Who or what observes the I? The I, this I. And the initial answer could be the mind. I interpret what I see through my eyes. Step back even further. Who or what observes the mind? And again, immediate answer could be the intellect, which discriminates between different impressions in the mind. Let us ask the question, but who or what observes the intellect? And here we would arrive at the answer, the Atma, or the self. Atma can be seen on various levels, but I will use it now in one way. And that Atma is of the quality of consciousness, Sat, Chit, and Ananda, eternality, knowing, and bliss. So today I want to try to bring you back through all these steps. But I must encourage you at the outset. The quality of your experience is entirely up to you. This is a subjective science, the science of your own abhyasa or practice. Having said this, I want to encourage you to give it a try, to follow the following meditation and to try to arrive at the bottom of the glass. And not try to arrive. This endeavor is already steered by the mind and the intellect, but just let something happen. And whatever you experience during this exercise is just right for you, because it's a subjective thing. We are now talking about you. All right. Let my in the outset, I request you to find a good and relaxed sitting position. If you sit on the chair, which I assume, and try to just make your spine a little bit straight and open your chest, maybe by rolling your shoulders up and then down. And center yourself. That means be present now. Our first experience is that of our own body. Relax. Start with the feet. Feel the feet first. You might like to wiggle your toes. And relax. Move your attention from the feet upwards to your bottom where you sit. There are various muscle groups the lower leg and in the upper leg. Try to relax them all. Now go to your torso, the upper body where the very important organs are situated. And try to relax. You are a master of relaxation. The body does this when you go to sleep. Now you will be incredibly aware, but you will do the same thing. Just loosen all the muscles and relax. Move to your shoulders now. Oh, there's so much tension in some of your shoulders. In my mind's eye, I can see. Relax all this. Your face. Relax. If you have not done so already, kindly close your eyes and bring your attention now to your breath. Not in a forced way, but just bring it very gently to your breath. When you inhale, simply be aware that you inhale. And whenever you exhale, simply be aware that you exhale. Observe your in and outgoing breath. Be aware, in, out. Now gently, very gently lengthen your exhale. Just lengthen. The exhale. Do this for a few breaths. And now step back a little bit more. Be attentive to what is going on within you. Are there any thoughts? Any feelings? Inner dialogues? We are now observing the mind. Whatever content is there, simply take note without judging. watch the content of your mind as you would watch clouds in the blue sky. We move back a step further inward, as if taking a step back within yourself. Sense the space, the distance between you and what you observe goes on in the mind field. Observe any feelings, moods, knowing, oh, this is my mind working, or this is my mind feeling. But I observe all this from a distanced position. Now tap into a sense of ease, of calmness, of inner peace as you rest in this witness consciousness, this neutral witness, such a peace and calm. Absorb this experience of just being. Sat, eternal, Chit, and being a part of the divine, a blissful part. Remain for some more time in this space. Absorb the experience. Let it sink in a little bit deeper. The experience of just being. It is this other in ourselves, this witness of the mind, which when practiced brings us to the level of pure, unalloyed awareness or consciousness. Now become aware of your breathing again, please. In and out, breathing. And to go back into room awareness, please bring your palms together and rub them. You might like to put them on your eyes as if in palming. Then take the palms away from your eyes and look in the lines of your hands as if you're seeing them for the very first time. Thank you very, very much. In summary, it's all about stepping back and making the experience of stepping back, opening the door to the inside, if you so want, the door of consciousness, and then experiencing consciousness inside there. It is a practice, as our very, very astute knower of this yoga tradition, Eddie, has said, it's abhyasa, takes some practice. But please be open. Be a true scientist who, yes, looks objectively in the world, but looks also subjectively inside. Thank you very much. And over to you, Marcus.
Thank you, Satchidananda Swami. This was very relieving because for more than an hour we all had to concentrate and were focusing and listening to this really interesting talks of today. And this is a complementary mode of our consciousness to just go into the deeper space and not focus on anything, being carried by the breath in our unconscious. So this was a very nice practical demonstration also of what Eddie said before. I believe we are all in a different state of consciousness, and maybe all the other participants who are still here can put on the camera so that we can
see them.
Yes, Eddie, welcome back. Oh, David dropped out. Oh, David joined again. So if you can, please put back on your cameras so that we can. Jan, are you still there? Or you are in such a deep meditation? Oh, Christian and Satchidananda Swami now sitting under the same tree.
We were at the same place. So because we had only one access, we are friends, but we demonstrate our friendship by using everything, our access together.
Wonderful. So thank all of you to do this journey together, going through the different faculties of our consciousness, cognition, emotion, intellectual, and also now this meditative aspect of our consciousness. So I just like to come together again for another 15 minutes, and maybe everyone can say some reflective words on our common journey and experience, and give some maybe some practical ideas to the people how they can continue on their journey of consciousness. So who likes to start? Maybe Jan, you start. You are next to me here. Put your mic, please. Everyone, unmute.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. I really want to thank you for this invitation and for beautiful discussion. It was really amazing. All of the speakers gave really nice speeches, and was fantastic. So what I would reflect in a couple of sentences is just that I believe that the situation which we are now going through is something which is very positive along the line of what Christian said, that one has to always see the positive side and kind of what this kind of is bringing us for opportunities, And I think the opportunity is also that if we can somehow build, I would say, the motion towards how to say, really the new science, that's what always kind of attracts me, the new science, which will not has this prejudice that everything is material and ignoring the facts which we have discovered many, so to speak, at least 200 years ago. I mean, quantum physics is with us already for 100 years, right? And many other discoveries are with us for a long time and are completely ignored, because I think somehow, frankly, I'm not quite sure I understand why the society is so stuck in this old paradigm. Maybe you have some other ideas, but I believe that the new kind of science is really emerging, and I'm very thankful to have a chance to join this wonderful group of people. Thank you.
Eddie, how can we all become yogis within 5 minutes?
Well, the easiest way to become a yogi within 5 minutes is to take a slow, conscious breath. And we can instantly drop into the level of awareness that Satchidananda Maharaj was leading us through. It's very simple. Our breath is our link to the deepest portals of experience that we have within us. So to become a yogi, take a conscious breath. And then I'd say there's one other thing which is very important, is that along with taking a conscious breath, have a feeling associated with it of kindness and of generosity for all beings. And then when we breathe with an appreciation of breath, and when we breathe with this feeling of kindness and generosity, then we begin to extend that around us. So the yoga is not simply a technology of breathing and standing on your head, but it's also a technology of kindness and care. And then when we have true caring, then we really participate in a very positive, loving way with the world around us, and we can affect change. I really appreciated all the speakers this morning. I think that I'm very positive about there was a time long ago when science and religion, or science and spirituality, were not two different things, and then somehow they became two different things about 500 years ago or so, 400 years ago. Now I think they're coming back to be compatible again. And I think all of the speakers today really exemplified that sentiment. So it's really a pleasure to be part of this community.
Thank you, Eddie. So it's a good day today to breathe. Yes, Harald Waller, please.
Well, maybe I can inject something here. I mean, I would hope you are right, both of you, Jan. And I think theoretically this is really true. We are in a situation where we could do that, but I'm not sure it's so easy, because we have powerful economic, powerful political forces that are trying to just keep things as they are, because a lot of people just benefit from it, And there is a multitude of things. I will just take it under the heading of transhumanism, that are really steering towards the complete opposite direction. And I think one important thing is just being aware of that. I don't think we can say it's going in either direction, because it could go in both. The Greeks had the term of crisis, and this is a time of crisis where things can turn in both directions. So we need to keep the focus towards that direction that we really want to take it.
I agree with that, Harald. Right. But along the line of Christian, let's stay positive.
Yes, of course. So how can we get back our... Oh, you're back? Please unmute. Okay.
Here I am. Sorry, it was a phone.
Okay. Yeah.
May I add something to what Harald just said? I think we are in a time where kind of a door is opening, so there are many possibilities now. And what we need to do in terms of also consciousness is not just individually, but together as humanity, we need to shift. So it doesn't just help to trust that the authorities will solve all the problems that we have on this planet now. We need to do it ourselves, each individual. And the sooner we start by ourselves, the faster we will reach visible goals. And I think we sometimes lack the inspirations, but on the other hand, there are enough inspiration already there. We need to come to action and bring those things that we already know to a daily practice. And as more people are doing this, we have a shift in the consciousness, not just individually, but as a collective. And that will bring at some point, I would say, a non-linearity probably, and then bring a big shift. So that's at least my positive view. I think that's realistic also. But anyhow, we need to start what we can do.
If I may, I don't want to interrupt before Satchidananda Maharaj speaks, but in response to Professor Wallach, who I absolutely agree with, there's tremendous forces in politics and economics that wish to control and keep the status quo and have great personal gains. Is absolutely true. And one of the reasons why I said what I did was that though I think I'm somewhat of a realist, and not so much of an idealist at my philosophical point of view, is that I see an entire generation of young people who are being educated in ways that are different than the way I was educated or you were educated. For example, my daughter, who's 21, and all of her friends, they have a very different view of the world than I had when I was her age or even now. So for example, let's just take the idea of homosexuality or transgenderism and all of these types of issues that were things that we have had to struggle to kind of absorb, deal with, integrate into society and things like that. But for my daughter and all of her friends and a lot of the kids of her generation, to be transgender is completely normal. And to be, to identify as non-binary is completely normal. They don't have to struggle with these issues that have so plagued, the Western world in regards just to sexuality. And so that's just one idea. There are many, many others. So, and in terms of things like racism as well. When I was a kid, and I'm speaking very honestly, a lot of humor was, in even the comics that you saw on TV, they used racist forms of humor, and that was funny. You could make jokes about, I'm Jewish, you could make jokes about Jewish people or Black people or Latino people, and that was part of humor that you would see from everyone from Richard Pryor to George Carlin to anyone. But my daughter's entire generation does not think racism is funny. Like, I couldn't even make a joke at home now if I wanted to that was mildly racist or misogynistic or anything. You would just say, "That's not funny, Dad." And so the type of humor that I grew up with is no longer acceptable. And they don't have to be trained. They know that. So I just see there's a shift in behavior and a shift in consciousness that not all, but some of the young people have. And I think enough of it that it makes me feel like, okay, you know, step back and take a look at what they're doing. So I completely agree with your points, and I'm worried, frankly, about the state of the world. But I am hopeful when I see the behavior of some of these young people and how they have a new perceptive lens of the world. So that's where the perspective I was speaking from.
Yes, thank you for sharing your optimism, and I'm also very, very optimistic that we are in a historically very important aspect of the evolution of consciousness, and that's why we're doing this kind of journeys again and again. Maybe Satchidanand Swami, some final sharing words?
Yes, I have always seen in my life that there are sometimes parallel realities. And yes, there are developments which one has to worry about. That is definitely there, and it's all over the news, and it is everywhere. But there are also parallel things that are just as real. For instance, shifts in the awareness of at least many millions of people. They may not be the presidents of country, not yet, but Germany was reunited from the grassroots of dissatisfied East Germans, that at least some angle on it. So I think initiatives like this are very, very good. And I particularly find it encouraging that the two directions in which we think, that is, explore the world, and that is the duty of science, of bona fide science, and explore the inner world, and that was done by the wisdom traditions. I think if we bring them together, that has a big potential. Because what I found out in my travels and lectures, people now are interested in synthesis. They do not like just only yoga or only spiritual practice. They want to see, well, can science also find something so that we are not going in imaginative part here? Can that be observed also? And I think that is a realization, and that marriage of the outward going exploration and the inward going exploration, that is very nice. And that's what we try to do, as far as I understand. Otherwise, I would not be invited here. I would not be welcome. So
Thank you. Thank you, Satchidanand Swami. So, David, you are back struggling a little with technology. Still struggling with technology. Switch on. All right, at least we see you. So we have reached the final destination of our journey now with only 30 minutes delay. I promise in the evening we will be more precise, but anyway, it was a great pleasure with all of you on both sides of the screen. I mean, all over, and there are some really important people who have contributed to this project who are not visible on any screen. There's Hans Werner, for example. He's the president of the Conscience Association, which is carries the institute also, which is the organizer. He was very visible on the chat and answering many of your questions. I really like to thank Hans Werner for his organization and making all this possible. And also many other people helped with the websites, with the techniques, with the organization. Here behind the camera is Alexander, or Chris can be mentioned, so many others. So thank all of you to making this possible. And yes, I hope to see you again in a close future. We will announce, probably have another Global Consciousness Day where we're more focusing on experience or meditation and also inter-spiritual or trans-spiritual dialogue. I've seen today we have had a lot from India, like yoga, but this doesn't mean that we are focused on India. We have a trans-spiritual and trans-disciplinary approach, and yes, so we love variety. So thank you all for participating, and I wish you still a wonderful, great Saturday. All the best. Bye-bye.